On today's show, taking a look at the pitching side of things when it comes to Fangraphs' ZiPS projections. Is the combination of Dylan Cease, Michael King, and Yu Darvish a triple team bravo that could take them to the promised land, as well as the back end of the rotation, and whether or not is this bullpen actually being underrated by projections? All that and more. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, February 12th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Feel free to reach out to me on there to get your questions, comments, or concerns answered, including for the mailbag, which is every Monday. So make sure you load up on the questions and send me them later, closer to the day. You know what I mean? That way you're for sure to be featured on this million viewership podcast. You know what I mean? And also go check out justbaseball.com, where I am working on not just writing about the Padres and general baseball, but also the newsletter to keep you up to date with all the latest happenings in the league. Just look into it. My tongue got tied there for a second because I'm just so excited to talk about baseball today, guys. Today we are going to be talking about the ZiPS projections. Yesterday's podcast for February 11th, we did the offense of things. Just a quick overview of a thing that Fangraphs does every year. And to be quite frank with you, it makes for a good episode. Just to look at a couple of projections. Usually, in my opinion, we get like two off-season sort of statistical model projections things, and it's one from baseball perspective, it's the PECOTA projections, and then ZiPS projections, which is a little bit more about like the individual players. I tend to like the latter only because the PECOTA rankings are really weird. I've just never understood them all that much. They projected the Padres for 82 wins this year. Last year they projected them for 82. It's just a very weird thing, and I understand why they project them that way. It totally makes sense. But I think that the projections did not take into account how historically unclutched the Padres were last year. And that if they were just a little bit better, they were probably a team that was going to be on the edge of a wild card spot, or if not, what they ended up being last year, right? But anyway, enough about PECOTA. Let's talk about ZiPS and let's talk about pitching. We talked yesterday about the offense, and I think that pitching is unfortunately where it's a little bit harder to be optimistic, in my opinion, about the pitching, right? I think that this is a team that is you're just really scared about where they are. And in my opinion, what we've seen this offseason with how little, I should say, the Padres have spent, I think this is the area where it makes me more concerned that the Padres have not put any more money around. Because the offense, you can say, all right, well, they still have Tatis, they still have Machado, they have Merrill, and they just got to hope that Xander Bogaerts comes through. That's why you paid him in the first place, right? Same thing for Jake Cronenworth. When you look at the pitching, it's like this is a team that had a really, really good pitching staff last year, led by, of course, Dylan Cease and Michael King. And then you had Yu Darvish, who, when needed for a good start, was very, very good as a pitcher overall. And then you got some contributions from the back end of the rotation, Matt Waldron being one, Randy Vasquez a little bit too. But without Joe Musgrove, I understand why ZiPS is a little bit down on the Padres heading into the season. But let's start with the trio team bravo at the top, right? Michael King, Dylan Cease, and Yu Darvish. Projected this year, Michael King, 3.27 ERA at about 168 innings pitched, 185 strikeouts. Dylan Cease, an ERA of 3.43 with 207 strikeouts, basically kind of almost the exact same as last year. He had a 3.47 ERA last year, which it sometimes didn't feel like it at times, but even still. Also, Yu Darvish, 4.03 ERA with 116 innings pitched, 115 strikeouts. I don't usually like to go for wins above replacement for pitchers. That's just not usually what I like to do. But they're saying about 3.8 for Cease, 3.9 for King, 2.2 for Darvish, and then Randy Vasquez 1.3, Matt Waldron 0.8 in terms of what is currently what we can go by the expected kind of rotation for this Padres team. And that's pretty good. It's not better than the Dodgers because, as everybody knows, the Dodgers have a limitless supply of money and everybody wants to play for them, and it's kind of pointless to talk about them, right? But when it comes to the rest of the division, it's not bad. I think what the thing is with this team, and I think that their top two can be just as good as any other top 2 in the National League. I really do. But it also is the fact that this team, and as Fangraphs writes, by the way, shouts to my guy Dan Zembrowski, love you, man. The article basically points out that if you look down the projections, you see the problem here. There's not much after the starting 5, and when it comes to pitchers, it takes a great deal of good fortune to avoid having to dip well past your 5 best starters over the course of a season. So they really need Michael King, Dylan Cease, and Yu Darvish to be great. When it comes to Dylan Cease, look, the one thing that I say that he has going for him, while he can be frustrating at times, and I think that unfairly, people that I've talked to and people that I see covering the Padres are like, oh, I don't know, is this guy like really, can he take you to the promised land? And basically all of that is because of his really bad playoff start against the Dodgers. And it was really disastrous, but it was on short rest. And might I remind you that Michael King was just as bad against the Dodgers too. But anyway, over the past 3 seasons, 3.47 ERA, 4.5 with the White Sox, 2.2 the year before, 3.91 the year before. His value can't always immediately be attached to ERA because he does give up some hard stuff, particularly home runs. And, his home run fly ball rate, 9.1% last year. It doesn't suggest that he got super lucky and that nothing left the yard, but it does suggest that he was a little bit streaky last year, right? This was a guy who, at some points, his home run fly ball rate was 38%, right? But this year, I expect it to be basically the same thing, not to mention the fact that they've got a contract year situation here. Now, I think that contract year is something that we throw out a little bit too much, right? Like maybe we use that too much when we're analyzing pitchers, but I think with a guy like him, it's going to matter significantly. And I think he's going to be good. 4.8 win season last year. Again, I don't like personally using WAR too much. So while you look at his WAR total and you say, this is a guy who has been 4.5, 4.4, 3.6, 4.8, and for ZiPS to have him at 3.8, that is a little bit weird. Right? Like, that is a little bit weird. But again, might I remind you that ZiPS also thought Trent Grisham was going to be a 2.2 win player last year. So again, we're just talking about this particular set of projections. I'm not even giving my projections. I'm just kind of reacting to them, right? I think Cease is going to be fine. I think there's basically nothing that would stop him from being good, absent, any sort of injuries. He just kind of, you can chalk him in for being a mid to high ERA guy in the 3s. Best case scenario, as they point out, maybe a 2.7, 2.9 kind of season in which he gets, 220 strikeouts and he has a shot at that Cy Young. It's totally possible. In fact, he's literally almost won the Cy Young before back in 2022. But for me, I think that Michael King and him are going to be awesome. Michael King, as I mentioned before, he is expected to be great. While not nearly the level of strikeout stuff, which ZiPS is going to love, they still love the fact that this is a guy who got better over the course of last season, right? That's what I like about him so much. He got better as the season progressed. He figured out his pitching repertoire a lot better. This is a guy who was going up a lot of fastballs, then he was throwing curves a lot, then he wasn't throwing curves a lot, then he was throwing some sliders. He eventually stabilized and figured out his rotation. And still, 26.5 K rate and 28.2% K rate projections for King and Cease respectively. That is money, man. Like, that is absolutely better than a lot of the things out there. Can it be better than Corbin Burns, Zach Gallen? I don't necessarily think it is, but it could be. Could it be better than Snell / Yamamoto, Snell / Otani / et cetera, et cetera? It's going to be tough to overcome that, but I do really think that this top 2 can definitely just anchor a rotation for sure. I'm not really worried about either of them. I'm just not. I haven't seen anything with Michael King. Both of them are free agents, so if you're a big contract believe guy, then there's no reason for them not to go all out and have really great years. And yes, it was a little bit weird how they went to arbitration with Michael King, but I love these two. I think that they're going to be great. There's just not a lot of, there really isn't much to complain about, right? Like, there isn't much to freak out about. I think these two are going to be awesome. The question is with Yu Darvish for me, because Yu Darvish is what makes this rotation a true house of cards. And frankly, it's really frustrating. So I might go on a little bit of a rant after these messages, guys. I want to talk to you about one of our sponsors today, and it's a new one. It is really, really new for sure. Looking for a snack, guys? Maybe while you're listening to this podcast, maybe you're on the road, maybe you're waiting on the train. If you're looking for a snack that's both nutritious and delicious, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios, guys. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you in unsaturated fats to help keep you fuller longer. And hey, I like the no shells variety too. Perfect grab and go snack for busy days. And every time I get that little bit of a craving. And the best part is simply that it is just really healthy for you and whatnot, right? Like, it's really, really great. Love Wonderful Pistachios. And I just think that if you're like me, if you're trying to start off the year strong and not give in to your sweet tooth and whatnot, these things are awesome, man. Let me tell you. It's a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids as well. It's good for you. Who doesn't want that, man? I mean, come on. What are we doing here? It's fantastic. We love you, Wonderful Pistachios. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Go check it out. Nom nom. And just like that, everybody, we are back here thriving and vibing on the Locked On Padres podcast. Remember to go check me out on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Let us discuss Mr. Yu Darvish, ladies and gentlemen. Let's read from Fangraphs. Like I said about the past, once you get past Yu Darvish, ZiPS paints an absolutely bleak picture of what happens if Darvish gets injured or if one of Cease or King was to be traded, as rumors have suggested. Joe Musgrove, naturally, doesn't fit into ZiPS. They actually, I don't know if you guys have seen ZiPS, but they actually have the Joe Musgrove projections, and they had him doing pretty well. It's worth noting that Joe Musgrove's projections and Yu Darvish's projections were pretty on point last year. Darvish, they're expecting him for a 3.96 ERA last year. And he basically hit that for the most part. Like, when Yu Darvish actually pitched, he was pretty dang good. I actually forgot how solid Yu Darvish was when he was in, even if he had a couple like weird starts and whatnot. Last year, he put together across 81 innings a 3.31 ERA. The FIP was pretty good at 4.8 as well. The only question is health, and I think that that's the problem. Yu Darvish is one of those guys where I really think he kind of shows you one of the problems with this Padres team, which is he's a good pitcher, but literally the entirety of his Padres tenure, and I mean entirety, has been defined by whether or not he's healthy. That is it. Yes, he has gone down the strikeout rate, which is why ZiPS is a little bit lower on him than usual, right? They're projecting him as like a 1.2, sort of win pitcher, which, by the way, is fine. So I'm sorry, a 2. Wait, I'm looking at last year's projections. They're projecting him as being a 2.2 wins above replacement pitcher. That's really good for a pitcher. I think the problem, though, is at his age, the age of 38, considering that he's got more years on his deal left, by the way. I just think that, 2028, it could be worse. But when you look at Yu Darvish, every single year is defined by health. Everything. His first season with the Padres, electric in the first half, was injured in the second half, and that's why he fell apart. The year after that, he kind of tinkered with things, and he maybe was, maybe that was the peak of what he could deliver as a Padre, right? Because after that, in 22, he was like an ace quality pitcher who basically went out there and always showed up when they needed him to. He was getting a decent amount of strikeouts, and more importantly, not walking as many batters. And the next year, kind of gets hurt, isn't able to kind of keep up with the rest of the Padres team. And frankly, 2023 was a mess. But when he's on the field, he's pretty good. But 4.56 ERA in 23. And then last year, gets hurt out of the gate, wasn't really doing all that well. He's going to be a good pitcher when he plays. And frankly, his type of production is awesome for number 3 starter. What's not awesome is the fact that if he gets hurt, we don't know what's going on with the rest of this team, especially since they have not spent money on any of the other free agents out there. Is there another free agent out there? I don't know. Maybe. I've seen names like Jose Quintana tossed around. I've seen Patrick Corbin tossed around. I've even seen the Heen dog, Andrew Heaney, tossed around. That's not bad, but I do think that those guys, with the fact that the Padres don't have a lot of money to spend, I wouldn't be shocked if those guys are like 1 year, $8 million, and Preller isn't even able to hand that out right now with the ownership turmoil, with the uncertainty, with luxury tax, all that sort of stuff. It's just kind of the situation that they're in right now, unfortunately, right? But hey, here we are. With Yu Darvish, the entire thing is health. I just don't know if he's going to hold up at age 38. If he did, That would be the type of thing that saves this Padres rotation. If he gave the Padres like 130 innings this year, right? If he could give the Padres 130 innings, he's projected at 116. If he could give them like 130-ish innings and give them like, a high threes ERA, maybe low fours, maybe 3.8. I'm being a little bit greedy here. As ZiPS projects in terms of the 80th percentile outcome, 3.38 ERA, I could totally see that. Like, I really could see Darvish. I know that sounds crazy. I know it sounds like my bias is showing, but it's absolutely possible that he does that. Absolutely possible. But the problem is after he gets hurt, we don't really know what else the Padres are. I'm sorry. That sounded really bad. If he were to get hurt, the Padres don't really have a lot of options. They don't like Omar Cruz all that much. They don't like Austin Krob. Adrian Morejon has been getting some buzz, and that worries me a little bit, right? But I don't hate it only because with the loss of Joe Musgrove, I'm totally down for this team just trying everything. Even though Adrian Morejon was really great in the bullpen last year, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If they decide, let's give this a whirl one more time, I wouldn't hate it. But personally, I think it's Matt Waldron and Randy Vasquez who should be expected as of right now. Don't get me wrong, we're going to see, as Dennis Lin wrote in The Athletic the other day, it is totally possible, like we're going to see Matt Waldron, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, Brian Hoeing has been reported. Stephen Kulak is actually a guy that the ZiPS projections likes a little bit. You know what I mean? So there's hope for guys delivering value. It's just that the upside of this rotation is really, really capped by the fact that their third starter is a guy that is really, really old, even if brilliant when he stays healthy. But he's past his prime. He's just past his prime. And his health, by the way, yeah. When I say he's brilliant when he's healthy, I'm saying he's like a high threes ERA guy with a decent strikeout rate and is not going to walk guys. He's just going to give you innings. Like, he's going to be very good. But at his age, this ain't, Paul Skeens. You know what I mean? This is even younger Yu Darvish, where when he pitched, he was injury prone, but he would be lights out. That's not this version of him. He's a low walk rate guy who gets a tad amount of strikeouts, and he pitches deep into games, and he helps you out, right? And it's always just a blast to watch him. So I'm worried about that. ZiPS is not very high on Matt Waldron, and it shouldn't be. I feel like they weren't high on him last year either, especially with the knuckleball and whatnot. Randy Vasquez, 1.3 win pitcher. That's actually not bad. Like as an outcome, I would actually not hate that if they were to get that out of Randy Vasquez. And I do think that Randy Vasquez, what I saw from him personally last year was a guy who I think that he's more of a long inning reliever. And again, we're going to see what happens, but 126 innings, 4.3 ERA, 96 strikeouts. It's not the best with the strikeouts. I don't love that, but you could do worse, right? You could do worse. I'm still wondering if the Padres are going to sign somebody. I have not heard that they're going to. I think they need to trade someone. I think Robert Suarez might not be on this team necessarily by the time we get into, the thick of things. But even still, really, really expecting good stuff from Randy Vasquez. Better than last year, I should say. I still think that there's some hope for him. But I'm more interested in Johnny Brito. They've got him projected in 88 innings for 4.19 ERA. That's pretty good. Not a lot of strikeouts, and I know he didn't look good last year, but I just think he's super young. I'm ready to believe in this guy. I think Randy Vasquez's stuff is not nearly as good or as high ceiling as Johnny Brito's stuff. And I think Matt Waldron is going to be one of those guys that might just get taken out at some point. Like, that's totally possible. But he is still a guy that at minimum, he might go 138 innings. That's what they're projecting him for. He might be okay. I really think Matt Waldron, like, the projections are not taking into account that there was a period when Matt Waldron was like a 3.7 ERA guy. He just totally was. And he was really, really good. Patrick Mahomes is tweeting about him, right? Like, he had his moments, and then they sent him down to work on some things. His sweeper, if he's able to get it going. By the way, 146 innings last year, 4.91 for Matt Waldron. I know that's not great. He just got really torched after the All-Star game. Like, he was just giving up stuff left and right. But his sweeper, when he's able to hit the outside of the corner on both sides, and when he's able to throw his knuckleball, especially on the inside at batters, the weighted on base for those numbers and expected numbers are really low. Go look it up. I wrote about Matt Waldron for justbaseball.com last year. When he's locating that pitch on the corners, the sweeper on the outside corner and then the knuckleball on the inside corner, it's very hard to hit him. So I think he can be a guy that we can be like, all right, this will amount to something. If Darvish or King or Cease or anybody gets hurt, I think these guys can fill in and be okay. The problem is the depth. That's the problem. If Randy Vasquez or Matt Waldron or Johnny Brito don't break out, I don't really know what this team's going to do. Right? I just don't. Is Adrian Morejon going to get some turn? It's possible. Is Brian Hoeing going to get some turn? Maybe, but he was really, really good in the bullpen. And then you've got some other guys like Austin Crabbe, who we talked about before, Brian Hoeing, who they might be trotting out in the bullpen. That is something to keep an eye on for spring training. Who gets those last two spots? I think for right now, it's Waldron and Randy Vasquez, even though I personally think it should be Waldron and Johnny Brito. But I could be dead wrong. We'll have to see. I just think the starting rotation is going to be, it's limited, and they really are going to need guys to stay healthy, man. But I think it's the pitching. That's the reason why people are down on the Padres, and that's the reason fans are upset that they couldn't get Roki Sasaki. The Dodgers just got him for fun. They're like, we don't even need him. He might just pitch 50 innings for us this year. But we got him anyway because grow the game, right? So we'll see how that goes. But in terms of the bullpen, I am a little bit surprised on where ZiPS is. And in my opinion, this is the key. And we're going to talk about it in a second. In my opinion, the bullpen is being underrated by ZiPS. All the projections in general, I understand that last year the Padres bullpen looks a little bit better on paper too. But for me, the guys in this bullpen are infinitely more talented than any of the additions that the Padres made last year. And they have some guys that are going to bounce back. And if their bullpen is as good as I think they can be, it might make up for the issues we have with the starting rotation. But we're going to break it down, guys, in a second. But first, a few words from some of our sponsors. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing into the final segment about the bullpen for the Padres, which I think could be really, really good this year, depending on how things shake out. We're going to assume for now that Morejon, guys like Brian Hoeing, both of them, that they're going to stay in the bullpen. That's what we're going to assume. But reading again from the Fangraphs article, as for the bullpen, the second verse is the same as the first. ZiPS really likes 5 pitchers likely to see time in the bullpen. Those 5 pitchers being Suarez, Adam, Estrada, Morejon, Hoeing, all those guys, right? But there's a gulf after that. Most clubs have a number of mediocre emergency relievers, frequently organizational players who are projected to be a bit below average. The Padres lack depth here as well, with 2 relievers who have a 95 to 100 ERA plus projections, Brian Hoeing and Stephen Kolek, already set to be in the pen. San Diego's relief corps projects as average to above, but only so long as or most of the top relievers stay healthy. So here's my thing. I am actually not that against any sort of projections usually when it comes to bullpen, because bottom line is, it is, as we've talked about many times, it is one of the most volatile positions, not just in baseball, but possibly all of sports. This thing can get really wacky crazy. So when you see that they're projecting Robert Suarez to not be nearly as good this year, to be just a .4 win player, which is not very what we'd expect, right? Robert Suarez last year was an electric closer for the team. That being said, I don't hate it. You know why? Because I've had some problems with Robert Suarez. He does not get nearly as many strikeouts as he did his rookie year. His home run fly ball rate was only 9.5%, and his FIP, his xFIP actually, was 3.81. 2.77 ERA last year. Don't get me wrong, he's super fun. We call him Bobby Fastballs, all that sort of stuff. But I don't hate this. I don't hate that they're projecting him to be a little bit low. I do think that just the lack of a strikeout rate when you're throwing that hard, throwing that many fastballs, does worry me a little bit. At some point, people are going to touch up on that. It's velocity. You need to have a little bit more movement. But anyway, they are projecting him actually for an ERA of 3.76, which is pretty high. That's really, really high and a little bit unfair. In my opinion, a little tiny bit unfair, but again, it's bullpen, and I could totally see this happening because, again, he just does not get as many strikeouts as I would like, right? They're projecting him 50 strikeouts in 52 innings, 52.7 innings pitched. I get it. But for me, I am not worried. And the reason I'm not worried is because the rest of the bullpen is really solid. Right? Jeremiah Estrada, 3.26 ERA projected in 60 innings, 84 strikeouts. I think he's going to do that. Last year, he was dealing with some injuries and some personal stuff, and that's what led to that weird, like, month and a half period where he just didn't know how to pitch anymore. Other than that, I think the guy's electric. I really, really do. He's 26 years old. I think he's a really big find for this team, and he's going to be good this year. Brian Hoeing, they're saying 4.34 ERA. I get it, but, I mean, the guy was really good for us last year, but I do think he pitched a little bit above his head. It feels like he got a lot of batted ball stuff in his favor, so I'm not hating on that. For me, where I am a little bit out, Stephen Kolek had actually a little bit better of peripherals than you would think. I'm not just saying that, by the way. Like, he really did have better peripherals than you would think. Let me see if I can pull this up really quickly, guys, because it was very funny last year. Stephen Kolek, who got way too much time, frankly, compared to what he should have had, but I believe his FIP was actually, like, really, really low last year. Let me see if I can pull this up. Stephen Kolek, one of those guys where I think he could just be an average reliever. I think he can do what, maybe even if just for a little bit, what Enel De Los Santos did, right? Like, I think he could be solid there. I really do. His FIP was 3.57 last year compared to the 5.21 ERA he put up last year. He produces ground balls. That's what they like a lot. 55.9% ground ball rate last year. So I'm a little bit more in on Stephen Kolek than the projections say. But even that being said, Robert Suarez, if he takes a step backwards, which is something that I've been predicting for a while, if Brian Hoeings takes a step backwards, I get it. That's not great. But you still have Jason Adam, 3.25 ERA. He is going to be awesome and potentially even the closer for this team. I really like that projections for him. Yuki Matsui, they have as a 3.69 reliever. And to me, this is low. And to me, here's the problem. Yuki Matsui is all about getting some more reps, and we're going to see what happens. This is a guy who has been a big-time closer in Japan before. He's used to closing out. He was not very good in high-leverage situations. Don't get me wrong. He blew like 3 games by himself last year. But for me, what I see from this team, if he just locates his fastball better, and with Ruben Yabel and company, he can do that. If he elevates it properly and at the right times, if he doesn't elevate it, I should say, so he doesn't do that too much, that's where he got killed. The stuff is great. We've talked about this before on this podcast. That's why I'm a little bit surprised by this ERA mark for him. I get that he can get a little bit home run happy go ball. I get that. But he gets some of the best chase stuff in the league, the best whiff stuff in the league, and in general, his expected stats were really good last year. An expected ERA of 2.94, strikeout rate of 26.8. He just has to watch the control. He needs to figure out how to not elevate that fastball too much and how to locate the fastball. That way he doesn't pitchers are just waiting on it. They're waiting for him to make a mistake with the fastball where they throw it up and then they take him deep instead of swinging at his other stuff. Right, because his other pitches, they couldn't hit it. The guys just could not hit this ball. They just couldn't. 200 batting average with an expected batting average of 166 against his slider, and the split finger 193 and expected of 189. He's really good. And he got a whiff rate of 44.8% on the slider and 41.1% on the split finger fastball, right? Like, it's all about, can they figure out the right combination of when to throw his fastball when he needs to, and for it not to elevate too much, so pitchers just see that thing coming in, they see it rising, and they are able to time it so well and take him deep, right? They are not able to hit his other pitches, though. So to me, these projections are really low on Yuki Matsui. And then there's some other really solid guys out there, guys that I'm really excited about. Sean Reynolds was really good last year, and I think that the projections are being like really mean with him, right? I think he could be great. Wandy Peralta, not so much, but I think guys like Sean Reynolds and Alec Jacob, and maybe even a little bit, maybe we get a bounce back season from Tom Cosgrove. I think all of that combined can make up for whatever regression I see from Robert Suarez. So I do think ZiPS is being a little bit low on the bullpen. I don't know if it's going to be the best bullpen in the league, but I think they can be like the same thing as last year, if not better. I really do. I really, really do. I think they can be the 10th best bullpen, the 11th best bullpen, 12th. I think they can be top half. I do think that there is some downside, again, if Suarez regresses the way that I think he will, and if the rest of the bullpen doesn't catch up with him. I understand that. But for me, ZiPS is being way too down in general on guys like Sean Reynolds. guys like Yuki Matsui, and they're ignoring the possibility of a guy like Alec Jacob and Tom Cosgrove, who was brilliant 2 years ago, right? And then Jason Adam is going to be awesome. Jeremiah Estrada is going to be awesome. And I think they're making a little bit of assumption that Adrian Morejon might not stay there. Same thing with Brian Hoeing. I think this is a good bullpen. I really do. I think this is a really good bullpen. I am wondering, though, if they end up trading Suarez just because of the money-related things. But I just don't. I think this is way too low, man. I really do on a lot of these pitchers. I think the Yuki Matsui thing is really low. I'm not saying he's going to be wipeout closer. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-star this year. But there's just a lot of guys in this pen that I trust. I know that having Tanner Scott, it stinks that they lost him. I get it. And you gave up one of your best pitching prospects too. Like, Tanner Scott was amazing for this team last year. He really was. He really was. And now he's going to be pitching for the dastardly Dodgers, right? I just think that it's really being underrated, the rest of this bullpen. Wandy Peralta scares me, right? The two things that scare me the most is a potential Robert Suarez regression and Wandy Peralta. Those are the two things that I can't really sell you on. But Alec Jacob, man, and Sean Reynolds, again, might I remind you, Sean Reynolds last year, it wasn't the most amount of time. It wasn't. But this guy was so low-key good. Now, again, maybe this is kind of one of those, it's kind of like Tom Cosgrove where we didn't talk about him much and then he came into this next year and he was dreadful. But I still think it's worth mentioning in 11 innings last year, and it was still just his first year, 11 innings, Sean Reynolds had a 42.9% strikeout rate. That's crazy. 0.82 ERA, and his expected stats, he had a FIP of 0.98, expected ERA 1.88. That's pretty dang good in 11 innings. Now, the walk rate is why I think ZiPS is like, okay, we know his strikeout rate's going to go down, right? This guy isn't going to be that good. And if he's got a 10.2% walk rate, that's pretty crazy. But if you're going to expect the strikeout rate to go down, I'm expecting the walk rate to maybe not be nearly as high either, right? I just think this guy's going to be okay. And he's got stuff. He throws hard, gets a lot of strikeouts. What else can you ask for? And he's 26. It's not like this is a super old guy that they're counting on, right? So for me, I think there's the potential that this bullpen helps make up for some of the problems with the starting rotation. But again, all in all, I think the projections are really fair. I think this Padres pitching staff is talented for sure, but it is definitely a house of cards, and it is fair to say a good amount of stuff went right last year. A good amount, right? A good amount went right, particularly with Michael King, Dylan Cease, and some of those bullpen guys. But there's also a lot that went wrong. Tommy John surgery for Joe Musgrove. Yu Darvish wasn't there basically the whole time. Michael King didn't know how to pitch for a month and a half. And they still ended up being good. So you take that into account. We know Michael King is ready. We know Dylan Cease is ready. If Yu Darvish stays healthy, Randy Vasquez can make improvements. Johnny Brito can make improvements. I think that this pitching staff is okay. It's definitely one that can take you to the playoffs. The problem is going to be health. The problem is going to be health, and without them making any additions this offseason, it cannot be understated enough that the Dodgers deciding to get Roki Sasaki just for fun really did hurt this team. It really hurt this team because that would have raised their floor a whole lot more, and it would have given them a controllable pitcher. That's something for the future to talk about, right, when it comes to controllable pitching. But in terms of right now, you could be a lot worse. There are other contenders that, in my opinion, have scarier rotation issues, right? I really do. I think that there are other contending teams that might get a little bit scary. I'm not talking about Philly, right? Obviously, Philly's very good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the D-backs, but the Giants, San Francisco. We sure San Francisco's going to be amazing. Like, I love Logan Webb and the Robbie Ray combo, but after that, it's like, it's not great. Like, we're also assuming Robbie Ray's going to be great. And Kyle Harrison, Justin Verlander at his age, Jordan Hicks, we sure those guys are going to be great, right? And then in terms of some other contenders, Brewers, I think their pitching is always randomly pretty good. But after Freddie Peralta, you're going to have Brandon Woodruff, don't get me wrong, but Myers, Savali, Nestor Cortez, are we sure the Padres can't be better than that? When it comes to the Mets, that team that spent $1 bajillion this offseason, we sure Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, and Clay Holmes are going to be better? I don't think so, not necessarily. What happens with the Padres, though, is we just got to hope that they stay healthy, which, granted, is kind of the case for a lot of teams. So I think it's unfair to penalize the Padres more in some ways to be like, wow, they're really in trouble if the starting pitching gets hurt. That's every team in the league. Look at the Dodgers. We almost beat the Dodgers because their whole pitching staff got hurt. So we'll have to see, guys. But those are my thoughts on the ZiPS projections for the Padres pitching staff in 2025. You can check out the full articles, of course, by Dave Zabrowski over at FanGraphs for his write-ups and breakdowns, including writings and breakdowns for all the other teams if you want to check that out. Tomorrow's episode, guys, we are going to be doing just some classic type of content, easy to click on content, you know what I'm saying? We're going to be talking about the biggest questions for the Padres heading into 2025. I've got 6. Actually, I've got 7. We're going to talk about them. We're going to break them down because why not? This is a Padres podcast. We got to. And then Friday episode, I think we're just going to talk in general about this feeling that I feel like a lot of fans have had. Why does it feel like the Padres championship window is gone? We're just going to talk about that real quick because I think that there's a sneaking feeling from a lot of fans out there. So that's what's on the dock for now. We've got plenty of crossovers on the dock later too. It's going to be fun. Baseball is almost here, guys. And with that all being said, guys, stay safe until next time, and stay safe, and stay faithful, my Fire Faithful homies. Take care.